Somewhere in the world right now, a Filipino is being asked where they're really from. Not because of their passport, because of their face. Some Filipinos have deep brown skin and wide, expressive eyes. Others have fairer complexions, sharper features, or a look that seems to belong somewhere else entirely. East Asia, South Asia, even the Pacific Islands. And for generations, people just called it mixed blood and moved on. But scientists didn't move on. They kept digging, and what they found buried inside Filipino DNA completely rewrote the story of who Filipinos are and how they got here. This is not just about ancestry. It's about one of the most extraordinary human migration stories ever recorded. To understand why Filipinos look the way they do, you have to go back, way back. Around 50,000 to 70,000 years ago, early modern humans began moving out of Africa in waves. Some of those waves eventually reached Southeast Asia, and from there they spread into island chains scattered across a vast ocean. The Philippine archipelago, over 7,000 islands, became one of the most isolated and yet most contested pieces of land on Earth. The first people to arrive weren't who most people imagine. They were the Negrito peoples, sometimes called the Ayeta, the Ati, and the Batak, among others. These early inhabitants carry some of the oldest genetic lineages on the planet. Studies comparing global DNA have found that some Negrito groups in the Philippines are more genetically distinct from other modern humans than almost any other population alive today. They didn't just arrive early, they stayed, adapted, and survived, long before anyone else showed up. Then came the next wave. Around 4,000 to 5,000 years ago, a massive migration began pushing southward through Southeast Asia and into the islands. These were Austronesian-speaking peoples, originating from what is now southern China and Taiwan. They brought with them agriculture, new languages, and new ways of building society. As they spread across the Philippines, they interacted with the Negrito populations already living there, sometimes peacefully, sometimes not. But genetically, the contact left a permanent mark. Modern genomic research has shown that most Filipinos today carry ancestry from both of these founding groups. The proportions vary depending on where a person's family comes from, which island, which region, which coastal town or highland village. That variation is part of why two Filipinos standing next to each other can look like they come from entirely different countries. But the story doesn't stop there. The Philippines sits at the center of one of the busiest crossroads in human history. For over 1,000 years before European contact, the archipelago was part of active trade networks connecting China, India, the Arab world, and the kingdoms of Borneo and Java. These weren't just commercial exchanges. People moved, communities formed, families blended. Chinese traders and settlers began arriving in significant numbers as early as the 10th century, with migration intensifying through the Ming Dynasty period. Their genetic contributions are visible today, particularly in communities along coastal Luzon and in Fujian-linked lineages that have persisted for centuries. Studies of Y chromosome and mitochondrial DNA have traced these ancestral threads through hundreds of years of history, finding them woven quietly into the Filipino genome. Then came a chapter that changed everything on the surface, but perhaps less than people assume underneath. Spanish colonization, beginning in the 16th century, brought European contact, Catholic missions, and centuries of colonial rule. European genetic contributions did enter the Filipino population during this period, but large-scale genetic studies have consistently found that the European component in most Filipino DNA is relatively modest compared to the deeper Austronesian and Negrito foundations. What colonization did change was the cultural lens through which Filipinos came to see themselves. European features became associated with class and status. Lighter skin was elevated.
And for generations, Filipinos internalized a hierarchy of appearance that had nothing to do with their actual genetic story. The DNA, however, was never confused. It kept an honest record.
What makes the Filipino genome particularly fascinating to researchers is something called genetic admixture, the layering of different ancestral populations over time. The Philippines represents one of the most complex admixture patterns ever studied in a single national population. Researchers analyzing hundreds of thousands of genetic markers have identified at least 4 or 5 distinct ancestral components contributing to what we call Filipino ancestry today. That level of complexity is rare anywhere in the world.
And within the Philippines itself, the variation is staggering. A person from the Cordillera Mountains of northern Luzon may carry a very different genetic profile than someone from Mindanao or the Visayas. Island geography, migration history, and centuries of relative isolation between communities created distinct clusters of ancestry that still show up clearly in modern DNA data. There is something profound about learning that your appearance was shaped not by a single origin, but by thousands of years of human movement, survival, and connection. Every Filipino who has ever been told they look unusual or been asked to explain their features is, in some way, carrying a visible map of that journey. The Negrito ancestors who walked those islands tens of thousands of years ago, the Austronesian farmers who crossed open water in outrigger canoes, the traders from Fujian who stayed and built families. All of them left something behind, not in stories or monuments, but in the quiet architecture of the human body itself. Science has a way of answering questions that history tried to erase. Colonial powers rewrote names, languages, and identities, but they could not rewrite DNA. And what the DNA says is that Filipinos are not one thing. They never were. They are the living result of one of the longest, most layered human stories on Earth. The next time someone looks at a Filipino face and struggles to place it, maybe that struggle is the most honest response possible. Because that face holds multitudes. It holds ancient migrations and ocean crossings. It holds the memory of peoples and places that existed long before any modern map was drawn. Some histories are written in books. Others are written in blood, in bone, in the quiet spiral of a double helix, waiting patiently to be read.